Ladies and gentlemen, I have called this press conference today to address an issue that is of great importance to both me and my most loyal supporters, which is my penchant for publicly saying the word nigger. For reasons that I will elucidate in the rest of the speech, you won't actually hear me say nigger in the way that you've heard me say it over the years in this transmission. But rest assured that the microphone I'm speaking into will still record me saying the syllables nin, ga in quick succession, because I have not, and will likely never, lose my fondness for saying the word in private. This shift in my public messaging is not intended to signal a shift in my underlying views on the propriety of saying the word. I continue to believe that those who assign the word an ontological significance that they assign to no other words in the English language are all idiots and assholes of one or another persuasion, and that they are fundamentally incapable of defending their views in any forum that values intellectual honesty, racial equality, and free expression. I also maintain that every breath you breathe in the service of bolstering the spirit of stupidity, fear, and repression that sustains this taboo is a breath you are breathing in the service of evil. History will judge all the otherwise decent people who allowed this norm to persist for as long as it has as unwitting agents of racial segregation, and I'm pleased to report that I am still not a member of that disreputable cohort. In all of these respects, my views remain unchanged. Why then have I decided to voluntarily censor myself? Why am I capitulating to the demands of an unthinking mob at the expense of my own dignity and principles? The answer, dear friends, has two parts, one pragmatic and one substantive. To delve into the pragmatic, I'd like to invoke the memory of my fellow integration, Abraham Lincoln, when he was justifying his decision to suspend the writ of habeas corpus during the Civil War. For those who aren't familiar, the writ of habeas corpus is a check on executive power from the judicial branch that compels the executive to provide a reason for the arrest of whoever is detained. Think of it as a show-me-the-body/where-my-at protection afforded to people who've been arrested so as to ensure that they haven't been arbitrarily detained. When the writ's processed, whoever's holding the detainee has to bring them before a judge and demonstrate the legality of the detention. If the judge rules that the detention is legal, then they stay in jail, and if the judge rules that it isn't, then they're free to go. Now in peacetime, this is a perfectly reasonable legal protection for the executive to abide by. For not abiding by it would suggest that the state has the right to just abduct off the street and detain them indefinitely without having to answer to anyone, which is obviously pretty unsettling and fucked up. The writ of habeas corpus is one mechanism of due process that allows us to confirm that they aren't living under that kind of tyranny, by demanding that a neutral third party, namely a judge, step in and free a nigger if the state is up to some fuck shit. With that being said, why Lincoln was stuck between a rock and a hard place in the spring of 1861 when he suspended the writ of habeas corpus for civilians in Union-held territory whose sympathies were allegedly with the bitch-ass that we all know and hate as the Confederates. On the off chance that you don't know about the Confederacy, they were a ragtag group of hoes who fought for the preservation of the institution of slavery and the destruction of the Union. Lincoln, on the other hand, was a real who initially fought the Confederates to preserve the integrity of the Union, and as the war progressed, to eradicate the practice of owning other human beings from the land of the free. So the dilemma that he was faced with at this stage in the war was to honor the due process rights of civilians who were suspected of siding with a force that's actively trying to destroy his constitutional government, while also fighting the forces actively trying to destroy his constitutional government. Like on the one hand, the guy obviously wants to protect his government of laws and not of men. But on the other, following those laws to the T would have likely led to the dissolution of that very same government by some very shitty and traitorous men. In simpler terms, Lincoln's commitment to law and order would have compelled him to put the Union, which is the very entity that administers law and order, in great jeopardy. He addressed this tension in his message to Congress during a special session that same year, where he defended his decision to suspend the writ by saying, "The attention of the country has been called to the proposition that one who is sworn to take care that the laws be faithfully executed should not himself violate them. Of course, some consideration was given to the questions of power and propriety before this matter was acted upon. The whole of the laws which were required to be faithfully executed were being resisted and failing of execution in nearly 1/3 of the states. Must they be allowed to finally fail of execution, even had it been perfectly clear that by the use of the means necessary to their execution, some single law made in such extreme tenderness of the citizen's liberty that practically it relieves more of the guilty than of the innocent, should to a very limited extent be violated? To state the question more directly, are all the laws but one to go unexecuted, and the government itself go to pieces lest that one be violated? Even in such a case, would not the official oath be broken if the government should be overthrown when it was believed that disregarding the single law would tend to preserve it? I like Lincoln's analysis of this conundrum because it highlights the necessity of recognizing the practical limitations of sticking to your ideals in the face of grim realities that you don't have the power to change. Setting aside whatever quibbles Lincoln's critics may have about whether he really faced a binary choice between enforcing the law and conceding the war, he's clearly describing a real tension that many of us face when trying to make good decisions. Sometimes your only options are something bad and something worse. And paradoxically, your bad choices can lead you to situations where you're empowered to actually make good and better ones, as was the case with Lincoln, if we're to believe his account of the situation. You shouldn't stick to your guns when doing so means shooting yourself in the foot. Under certain circumstances, there's nothing wrong with letting go of the guns. How this ties into my abstinence from the word is that I'm giving up my desire to freely express myself in the present so that I can actually make a business of freely expressing myself in the future, and build a greater platform that others can one day use to do the same. Just like Lincoln wanted to preserve a union where everyone gets to live as equals and have their rights respected, I want to build a culture where smart and well-intentioned people can say what they really want to say without fear of punishment. If I can build that culture faster by cutting back on my public shit and actually expanding my reach so that I can change the hearts and minds that I need to get the shit off the ground, then for all the Asian, European, African, and American that are counting on me, I'm happy to pay that price. You are welcome. Allow me to now address the substantive dimension of this concession, which can be summarized in 2 basic points. The first is that you don't actually have to say to say nigga. And the second is that the people who pretend to care about you saying nigga don't actually care about you saying nigga. To expand on the first point, all words are merely symbols that we use to communicate ideas, and the semantic content of those symbols varies greatly depending on the context in which they're invoked. For instance, if I'm in a Mexican restaurant and I say the word tamale, it's reasonable to assume that I'm talking about the food that Mexicans eat. But if I'm back in the 6th grade, and it's common knowledge that I have a huge crush on Molly Martinez, and my friends come up to me saying, "Yo, bro, I heard that you really like tamale. Like, really, really like tamale. Like, so much that you'd marry tamale if it gave you the chance." Is that true? It should be obvious that those weren't referring to the food. They were referring to the bitch that was the object of my infatuation. The same mouth noises, uttered in 2 separate contexts, give rise to 2 totally distinct concepts. In some basic sense, this process of encoding concepts in syllables and decoding their meaning by examining the context in which those syllables were uttered replicates itself across all of spoken language. The word spoon means tiny bowl attached to a stick, not because there's anything special about the s, p, oo, and n sounds being voiced in one fell swoop, but because there's an unspoken agreement among English speakers that in most cases, most of the time, we're going to make the spoon noise to invoke the concept of a tiny bowl attached to a stick. We could have just as easily called it a dwink and have that noise serve the same function. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what who don't speak English are up to when they be speaking their own shit. They're using different syllables to invoke the same concepts. The Hindi Urdu word for spoon is chamcha, but that don't mean shit to a British who speaks of Queen's English, because he isn't familiar with the lexicon of Hindi Urdu syllables and their corresponding concepts. However, there's a separate class of words that operate by a different kind of logic than the one I just described. Euphemisms are words that exist not to invoke a concept, but to refer to the existence of a word purely as a word, while also conveying that the word is too dirty and impure to be referred to in its raw form. For its existence to be acknowledged, the word must always be accompanied by the sanitizing agent that is its euphemism. As an aside, it should be funny to anyone with a pulse and a brain cell that drawing the conceptual link between a word and its euphemism in the first instance requires you to actually say the word that you're so desperately trying not to say. And the same applies to teaching others a euphemism. You actually have to say and believe something like, "There's a really bad word called that I will now forever refer to as the F slur, because I believe it's offensive to pronounce the word how it's actually spelled, irrespective of the time, manner, and place of the pronunciation. Sure, I did pronounce it just now, and I will pronounce it again in the future, but in both cases, I'm only doing it to educate those less knowledgeable than me about the imperative to not pronounce the word under any circumstances." One wonders why such titans of logic are so sensitive to the ethical weight of intentions in one circumstance, but totally blind to their significance in others. If they can say to teach others the importance of not saying, then why can't I say in a similarly pedagogical context that aims to point out the contradiction in that stance, and offer an alternative perspective that's much more defensible, both intellectually and morally? In any case, while most words are used in context where the goal is for 2 individuals to better understand each other, Euphemisms assume a conversational environment where the person using them isn't alone with whoever they're talking to, and where they have to signal their membership to the group that believes in the necessity of the euphemism, lest they be mistaken as a morally inferior outsider. A perfect example of this kind of superstitious rigmarole is the ubiquitousness of the N-word as a euphemism for nigger. Proponents of this gay-ass euphemism are doing the exact same thing that niggas like me do when we just refer to the term as nigger, with the added rhetorical flourish of implicitly claiming that niggas like me are bad people for refusing to use the euphemism. So to be clear, we're both saying, which is to say that we're both planting the letters N, I, G, G, and A in the minds of whoever we're talking to. But only one of us is penalized for it, because in the damn near 40 years that the silly double standard has been allowed to grow and supplant every elite institution in American culture, there hasn't been a single with the audacity to fight back and demand that it be repealed. That is, of course, until I showed up. Once again, you are welcome. We're about to have a lot of fun. But to wrap up this point, I don't need my mouth to make the noise, or your ears to actually hear it, for my brain to send a signal to your brain, and for your brain to receive it. As you very well know, I have been bombarding your noggin with nick after nick all throughout the speech, and you have helplessly let all of them in. So really, the so-called concession I'm making is purely cosmetic. I'm still saying exactly what I want to say, but without paying the algorithmic price for saying it the way I would in real life. To expand on the second point, I'd like to elaborate on the model I just alluded to in describing the process of saying something without actually saying it. Think of your brain as an island and the ideas that are being transmitted to your brain as packages being sent from other islands. As I've already demonstrated, the same idea can be expressed in many different ways. In the frame of my analogy, the same attitude can be conveyed with many different packages. If I were to send you a bouquet of flowers, a brand new car, or a bucket of gold nuggets, it's reasonable to assume that I like you. On the other hand, if I were to send you a bomb, some anthrax, or a vial of my piss, it makes sense to infer that I dislike you. Needless to say, we make these kinds of inferences about other people's orientations towards us based on the packages we've received from them all the time. Now, the relevance of this model to the assholes who want to stop me and others like me from saying that is that they want to assume control of the causeways on which those packages are being transported. Rather than allowing a package to move freely to its final destination, where the recipient can judge the sender based on its actual contents, they want to set up a checkpoint where you have to pay exorbitant fines to send a package in its original condition, and where they'll actually send lots of shitty packages in your name to a bunch of islands that have nothing to do with you, thereby defaming your reputation internationally, if you dare to even try and send a specific kind of package to what they deem to be the wrong kind of island. For example, I once met a Kenyan island named Eddie, and the customs agent on his causeway told me that I can't send packages to Eddie because my island sand isn't as dark as his island sand.
When we are talking to our fellow blacks, it's okay. I can call my fellow black. And
You're not cool with me calling you?
no, you cannot do that.
Damn, bro.
You'll be racist.
After some correspondence between the two of us, I sent Eddie some packages, and he sent me some packages.
So that means if you get, like, you have some friends, you can recommend your man.
I can recommend
Your name right here.
What do you mean? Like for the for the sofas?
Okay, if you got some friends, they have opportunities, job opportunities, you can recommend me.
Oh, I can recommend you.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. If there's anyone out there looking for a job, my Eddie
Tricks.
Eddie Tricks. My Eddie Tricks is the guy for your job. So please reach out, and I'll send you his CV.
Yeah, man.
Anytime.
I really appreciate, man. Yeah. I really appreciate, man, because I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a chill guy. He's a great hang. He's got a good head on. He's got a good head. Fuck. I don't have a good head on my shoulders. He's got a very good head on his shoulders. He's very faithful, very reliable, very hardworking, trustworthy, and I think he'd make a great addition to your workforce. So yeah, you got the stamp of approval for me, the of Eddie, and Eddie, who is the of me.
For real, man. For real. For real.
Yeah. And we were both extremely satisfied with the quality of the goods and what they revealed about the burgeoning friendship between our two islands. In the space of one meeting, we were able to relieve the customs agent of his duties and mutually partake in the benefits of free trade. My goods could now move freely to Eddie, and his goods could move freely to me. The reason I care so much about the free passage of goods is because I've learned through cruel experience what a perfect litmus test it is for the strength of your relationship with an island. On one occasion, I sent an island that I was on really good terms with for 8 years a package that had deemed such a threat to its security that it immediately destroyed the bridge between us, despite my repeated attempts at negotiation and compromise. In the aftermath of that destruction, I realized that if I knew the island was so trigger-happy from the start, I probably would have never normalized relations with it. Why should I establish ties with an island that expects me to receive all of its packages while refusing to receive mine in kind? If we're really equal members of a mutually beneficial partnership, I see no reason why I would feel entitled to such special treatment. Coming back to the point, the self-appointed customs agents who police these packages do so not because they care about protecting the sovereignty of historically marginalized islands, but because they want to maintain their hegemony over these sundry trade routes. They want to exert control over who gets to send and receive what packages in the service of an agenda that awards islands status based on the color of their sand as opposed to the content of their culture. They want to portray coercive trade agreements as wise measures that are to be maintained, when they're really instruments of inequality that should be discarded. Every island should be free to send whatever goods and build whatever bridges it wants to, with whichever island agrees to establish ties with it, unimpeded by the depredations of a force that has no business regulating that exchange. Insofar as you consent to the intrusions of that force and promote its authority to damage goods, burn bridges, and destroy entire economies, you are a piece of shit that's keeping us from discovering the thriving archipelago we could be a part of, were it not for your reflexive acquiescence to a gang of pirates that you're too cowardly to resist and too stupid to defend. Where we could be an assortment of interconnected islands motivated by a shared commitment to justice, equality, and love, we are instead ruled by a syndicate that aims to spread fear, intimidation, and hatred. Where we could trade in truly beautiful, innovative, and life-changing works of art, we instead trade in the same worthless, uninspired, and redundant copy pastas. Where we could be convinced by good arguments made for good reasons, we are instead cowed by bad arguments made for bad ones. The poverty of our imagination, when it comes to envisioning just how much more rich an existence we could collectively lead, is yet another intolerable cost of our capitulation to this cult of conformity. Which is why I'm urging you to either snap the fuck out of it, or if you don't think you can, empower me to help you. With that being said, like and subscribe if you fuck with the vibes, pay me a visit and I'll keep it real. Thank you for watching me talk my shit, and letting me share the way that I feel. See you later, have a good one, bye bye.